Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Sam Kern, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Warrant Officer Gerald Gobb. We warmly welcome the family of Lance Corporal Leo Stanley Thomas Cleary, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this telecast is possible by Returned Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Club Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of the ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was a vision of Charles Bean, Australia's first World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they'd done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honor, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths of floral tributes will now be laid at the base of Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lance Corporal Leo Stanley Thomas Cleary. Leo Cleary was born on the 20th of June 1916 in Armidale, New South Wales, the son of Stanley Joseph and Violet May Cleary. Leo was the oldest of 6 children in the family. He and his siblings, Ivy, Rita, Irene, John and Mari, grew up in Armidale. Leo attended St Mary's Primary School and De La Salle College before going on to study at Armidale Teachers College. Leo Cleary went on to become a teacher, and while teaching in a small community, met his future wife, Agnes, playing tennis. He also spent a year in the militia, parading part-time as a corporal in the 33rd Battalion. Leo Cleary enrolled in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 4th of June 1940. Initially detached to a signals unit responsible for installing, maintaining and operating communications equipment, he was later transferred to the 8th Division Signals. Towards the end of the year, and on the 28th of December, Cleary was found absent without leave. He received a fine and was confined to barracks for a week for this infraction of military discipline. In the new year, Leo married his sweetheart Agnes before being detached to join the 2nd 15th Field Regiment in February. Part of the 8th Division, the 2nd 15th was an artillery regiment, raised in November 1940. The regiment had been trained at Ingleburn with 18-pounder guns, the type used during the First World War, many of which, as noted in the regiment's history, were older than the gunners. By the time Cleary was attached to the regiment, however, it had moved into a new camp in Sydney. Cleary continued to bristle against military discipline and in May was formally admonished for disobeying a lawful command. With growing unease about Japan and the rest of the 2nd Australian Imperial Force sent to the Middle East, the 8th Division, of which Cleary's unit was part, was sent Malaya, Singapore and the islands to Australia's north. Cleary arrived in Singapore in mid-August 1941. In October, he was appointed Lance Corporal. The 2nd 15th went into camp at Nee Soon in Singapore, where the men trained and familiarised themselves with the jungle, and in late November the regiment received its first 25-pounders. Throughout November and the start of December, it seemed that war with Japan was increasingly likely. Late in the afternoon of the 5th of December, the 2nd 15th began moving from Singapore to the state of Johor, Malaya, to relieve the 2nd 10th Field Regiment, which was operating on the east coast of Malaya in support of the 22nd Brigade. The 2nd 15th was headquartered and took up position at Kluang Rubber Estate. On Christmas Day, back home in Australia, Agnes Cleary gave birth to a daughter. While Leo would learn of her birth, he would never see her or learn her name. By the start of January 1942, the Japanese had advanced through Thailand and most of Malaya. The 2nd 15th left Kluang and moved north to reinforce the Allied troops that would fight the main Japanese force when it reached Johor. The regiment's batteries went to Muar on the west coast, also further north to join the 27th Brigade to Payalang Estate under the command of the 2nd 29th Battalion and near Gemmas under the command of the 2nd 30th Battalion. Soon after moving into position, the regiment's gunners were in almost constant action, providing artillery support for the infantry withdrawal along the Malayan Peninsula towards Singapore. In the first days of the campaign, the regiment fired 7,950 rounds in the Gemmas, Segamat sector alone. By the end of the month, the last of the Allied troops had crossed the causeway and reached Singapore. Among some of the last to cross were the troops from the 2nd 15th, who formed the last artillery units in action on the peninsula. Having crossed the causeway, which was subsequently blown, the regiment was deployed to the western area in support of the 22nd Brigade. Preceded by a heavy bombardment, the Japanese attack on Singapore began at 10:30 p.m. on the 8th of February, when 2 Japanese divisions crossed the Johor Strait. The 2nd 15th inflicted heavy casualties on the attackers and sank some barges, but with communications cut, heavily outnumbered and the Japanese infiltrating between positions, the regiment withdrew towards Singapore, providing artillery support when needed. By the 13th of February, the battle for Singapore Island was all but over, and 2 days later, British forces surrendered. The regiment began moving from Tangling Golf Course to Selarang Barracks, Changi, and into Japanese capture. Initially imprisoned in the sprawling Changi prisoner of war camp, it was not long before prisoners were allocated to external work parties. Cleary was among those who joined Sea Force, which left Singapore on 28 November 1942. 10 men perished during the voyage aboard Hell ship Kamakura Maru. On reaching Japan, Sea Force was split. A group of about 250 was sent to Kobe Kawasaki camp, while Cleary was among some 300 prisoners who found themselves in No. 4 Branch Tokyo camp, located at Noetsu in the salt warehouse of the Shinetsu Chemical Company. In March 1943, the prisoners were moved to new temporary quarters in the nearby village of Arita. In October, the camp was moved to a two-storey warehouse of galvanised iron. About 60 of the men would perish there, including Leo Cleary, who died on the 5th of November 1943. While Cleary's cause of death was recorded as amoebic dysentery, camp guards were later charged with beating, kicking, and otherwise abusing him whilst he was sick and receiving treatment in hospital, thereby contributing to his death. Despite this, in the 2 letters that managed to reach his wife at home in Australia, he assured her that he was in excellent health. Leo Cleary was 27 years old. Today, his remains lie in Yokohama War Cemetery. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph today is displayed beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lance Corporal Leo Stanley Thomas Cleary, who gave his life for our freedoms and in the hope of the better world.
Please stand for reading of the ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozier or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses, barely working to the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff, and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and for your continued support for the memorial's development program. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.